SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. My name is Todd Kirk. I'm your host, and I'm joined by my co-host, Casey Trujillo, who is enjoying a little bit of sun through the window, but probably still freezing because I don't know what it is. He's always cold, and he's always trying to figure out how to find the warmest room in the building. So, Casey, how are you doing today, my friend?
Todd, I am doing great and well done. So we have a special guest on here who he's about ready to introduce. But Todd usually says something weird about me at the beginning, but doesn't mention that it's about me. And so usually our guests are like, "What? Who's he talking about me?" Like one time he introduced me as the sweaty guest, and the person on the line was like, "Wait, I'm sweating." So well done, Todd. You identified me as your co-host. I love it. Who's our guest today?
We are joined by a wonderful guest today. We're joined by Lauren Oswald, and she is a UX and market researcher who helps SaaS companies really figure out how to identify customer needs. And really pumped to have her on. Lauren, thanks for joining us here on SaaS Therapy today.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here. And yeah, on my end, I am not sweating. I am looking at just a snowscape of snow falling down right now, which is insanity. We're mid-April here.
Oh my gosh, you must be in Canada.
I am in Canada. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I knew it. So Lauren, obviously we only bring experts on this show, but for people that maybe aren't familiar with you, that haven't followed you on LinkedIn and the other social platforms where you're posting, give people a little bit of background around yourself and why you're an expert in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. As Todd had mentioned, I do user experience research as well as market research. And where I come in for companies and to help them is usually it's either to get to know who their current customers are. They maybe have never done that formally. And, certain people within the company may have a lot of great opportunities to touch base with customers, whether it's salespeople or account managers, maybe tech support. They hear a lot of issues coming in. But when it comes to actually formally having those conversations with customers and really gathering data and insights on them in a really reliable way, that's typically where I come in. So it might be specific things like looking to understand, who their user personas are, or maybe it's a really tough spot within the SaaS company's feature area, for example, and they don't know what to do about it. They've got some, unhappy customers, and they need to get to the bottom of what's going on and how they can make things better. So that's a lot of what I do, as well as the market research side. So maybe there's a whole new target market that a company is going after. Maybe they're bringing in some new features and wondering, can this be helpful for other people we haven't looked into before? So I'll help them on that aspect as well, really understand who might be a good fit for their product. And if they're not a great fit yet, maybe what are some things that the product can do to help them get there?
Okay. So, Lauren, Casey looks a lot younger than me. So, but we've both been at this for a while. And one of the things that I think is important to understand when it comes to the SaaS world is what would you say when you work with companies, do they have a good handle on what usage of their product looks like? Meaning, a lot of people are collecting telemetry data or they're looking at login information for users, but they may not be super mature in understanding what's most important for their company to be successful. And so this is kind of a two-part question. So I'm sorry if this sounds complicated. So I'm going to only ask one half of it to start so that I don't create too much confusion here. But when it comes to usage of a SaaS product, where do you think most companies are in the percentage of the things that they're creating that are actually having an impact on the customer? Meaning, is it 5% of features that really matter, 13% of features that really matter, or and I'm sure it's different for everybody. So I know there's that it depends answer, but just in your experience, what have you seen as far as the level of capability within the overall skew of things that a customer ends up or a SaaS company ends up creating that actually get used by the customer?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, definitely difficult to define with a number. But I would say this is that it's probably on the higher side of 50%, but what we see a lot is maybe some features that have been created, but not a lot of use yet, not a lot of pickup. It also can really depend on like what is that task that that customer is trying to do. Let's say it's an accounting program and end of the month they have to use this SaaS product no matter what. Like they need to do it to check off their tasks for the job, even if it's like not a really good experience for them. It's still something that needs to get done. So, you might see some data coming in, seeing like, oh, activity's high. And then going, oh, that must be a reflection that, this is a good experience for them and they're on this a lot. But that might not really be why, they might simply be using it because they have to. Again, even if that's not a great experience. And you can also get that the same way, if you see they're clicking on a lot of different pages within the SaaS product. Is that because they're really actively engaged and just getting a lot of tasks done? Or is it maybe because they're having trouble finding and navigating to what they really need to do? So yeah, like I think a lot of these products, they have a lot of use. But then, yeah, the best place to get into to really understand yeah, kind of how useful they are and what's really going on is starting with the data points, but really having that just be like the jump off, identifying what to explore a bit further.
Todd, do you
Okay.
have a second part? Yeah, because you said that was part one. Is there a part two?
There is a part two, but I'm trying to decide if it's still relevant based off of that answer. The part that I think's the challenge there is it sounds like a lot of people are collecting the data, but there's that second step that they need to take to go deeper and understand. And like what would you say are the things that companies are missing when it comes to this? Like, is it common that that SaaS companies are just like, we're killing it, look, our usage is really great, but not realizing the fact that it's like maybe people are just clicking around like crazy because they're super frustrated? Like what are things that you need to do well to interpret and understand the data you're collecting versus the people who are doing a bad job?
Yeah. The top thing you need to do well is gather the context. I think context is really key. So, yeah, you can have your numbers. I think everybody's doing their best to, work with the data that they have. But, we all have internal biases, and that's where research can come in. Um, because I think that's the biggest thing to remember. It's like nobody is free of bias. So you might be coming in as a super big fan and believer of this product, and you might have heard a couple like really amazing success stories that some clients have had. And those things will stick with you, right? As they should. These are some amazing drivers to continuing to work on such a product and be committed to that. But where we can see that drop off a little bit is just where people might be connecting too much and sticking to those stories and not hearing from, whether it's the other side of maybe some negative experiences that there have been, or even all of those experiences in the middle that, they might not be the sexiest of stories to hear, but they're still important ones. That's still customers that need that representation. So yeah, if there's anything, I would say it's context. And I'd say the second most important thing would just be remembering who you're speaking to, right? Because you might get product reviews, and it's classic with a lot of reviews, right? A lot of people are only driven to really take the time and energy and efforts to write about a review if it was a pretty strong experience, right? Usually quite positive or usually quite negative. So, but yeah, I guess that gets back to context as well. So context is key.
Oh, Lauren, that's fantastic. I don't think, and again, I love it. I don't think I've ever heard anyone explain that. Of often we look at data and say, okay, data speaks for itself, but you're saying there's another layer behind that, and your internal teams will have some bias towards that and say, yeah, it's because we did this, and that might not be the case. So that's why you need someone like yourself that's in there like, hey, I have no stake in the game here. I'm just trying to find the truth. Lauren, why doesn't everybody use someone like you then? Like, is it just because I love my story and it sounds great and let's just stick with it? But why are some reasons why someone doesn't bring in that research and have someone that's an independent person, someone and come in and say, hey, let me really help quantify this and find out if this is actually what's taking place, or it is the end of the month and it's accounting software and everybody just has to use it. So we always have great usage then. Like, why don't more people use it?
Yeah, I think there's two big reasons. I mean, one, going back to that internal bias, right? And kind of saying, well, I think we're doing actually a pretty good job because, we have, we've heard from some customers, we've got some glowing reviews. So one of it, I think, is just purely that, like, kind of only seeing the good stuff. But I would say the biggest thing is fear. Um, you know, I've worked with some customers, with some clients, like on some really sensitive projects. And I think especially these days, right? Like budgets are tight. Optics mean so much more now than they ever did, because companies are really looking to make sure that they're putting their resources to the best use and for the biggest impact. And one thing I have seen multiple times working with clients is you've got your group of people who are very focused on just the truth. They want to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And like that does take bravery around it, because your position, maybe as a product lead, or maybe you're a business strategist coming in, like your position might be on the line. Like, what if we uncover some things that aren't so great? You know the higher up leadership, have they bought into research?
Yeah.
Are they ready and okay with hearing maybe the not so good stuff? Like, it really is a vulnerable place to be put in, and so it really depends the whole culture of the company and where the company's appetite is for that sort of information.
Okay, so I get a part two question before Todd
Yeah.
speaks up. He got two, I get two. So, Lauren, you kind of hint at this, but if I was a SaaS organization and I wanted to work with you, and you hinted to some of this, but I wanted just to be more clear. What are maybe the top three things I should be prepared for if I'm going to invite you in?
Hmm.
You kind of hinted towards one of, is everybody on the same page? Like, is everybody willing to be vulnerable? Like, you kind of hinted towards that. And I don't know if that's one of your three, but to be successful, to have someone like yourself come in and say, yes, I do want to dive into this customer experience. I
Mhm.
do want to see why we're having success, where we might be failing our customers in the experience. What would be your top three tips to prepare someone for you?
Yeah. First one I would say is humility, right? Like, really being able to say, who has the perfect product, and knowing that there might be some areas for improvement. I think that's huge. Another one I would say is just a team you trust. I mean, not only would they, of course, have to trust me as that consultant coming in and helping them through the research, the strategy, the execution of it all, and then kind of taking it a little bit further and really applying the different sorts of things that have been learned and uncovered. But you need a team you trust. If it's just one person, who's been able to advocate and who says, hey, like, we need the insights. Like, we need to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's great. But where I've really seen clients be successful with these sorts of projects is where there's more buy-in from other people. So that would be the third buy-in. So you have humility, trust with your own team as well as myself, and then more buy-in. If you just have a couple people kind of pushing for it, it's going to be a lot harder to have the impact within the whole organization, past the product team.
Yeah, it's the classic change management problem that everybody has to deal with, right? It's not just like awareness that there's a problem. It's a desire to fix the problem and ability to fix the problem. And that only comes if you're willing to put yourself in the right state to where you are prepared to make that change as an organization. Lauren, I'm curious, when it comes down to this idea of supporting supporting a SaaS company and thinking through strategically how to be more successful with both like finding the right audience and then ensuring that they have a good experience when they come to you. A lot of orgs focus on just like, okay, well, we're going to map out the journey. But is that enough? And if so, if not, what else should we be doing beyond just being like, well, we get a customer to come to a site, they click on a button, then they create an account, then they do this, and then somebody calls them 3 weeks later. Like beyond just mapping out the journey, what else should we be thinking about?
Yeah. Well, one is just the experience. So I find the map is often you start out with the what is happening, right? Who is involved? What is the action, that's taken? What is the outcome? That is kind of like round one, let's call it, of starting this customer journey. What you do next is really dive into the experience. And again, this is where just a lot of strategy and thoughtfulness has to come through because, I've worked with clients where we get to that part now. Okay, now how's it been going for them? And again, they'll have their take on it, and their take might be very valid because they have had some, great connection points with the customers. But ultimately, like, again, it comes down to biases. Like, we have to understand that there's going to be some biases there. Often customers too, they don't necessarily talk about all of the bad stuff. They often want to be, approachable people and say the right things. So if you're having a conversation with someone who, has such stakes in the product, you can often just kind of get the good stuff. So there's the experience that you need to collect, not just the actions taken and the sequence of events. Then the other thing I would say is how do you collect the experience insights? So yes, we should absolutely talk to the internal people at the company because they do have some very valid thoughts. And there's certain aspects that they know really well about their customers. But let's talk to these customers too, right? Let's validate it. Like almost treat it as a hypothesis. Like, X person from the customer support teams believes that, this is how the experience is for the customer at this point in the journey. That's a great starting point. Now let's validate that. That's the hypothesis. Let's talk to the customers and let's see how that is. And really taking that, right? It's a very like scientific systems and evidence-based approach, and really looking at it from that's the norm. We're not challenging people because we don't believe them. It's simply just part of like a really solid research process and insights gathering process.
That's a cool mindset. I like that mindset to think of it that way. That's a great way to approach it. Lauren, if again, we set it up the way that you've talked about. I have the humility. We trust you. We have other people being part of this. Like Todd just asked you, I understand exactly what we're going to go through. What are some expected results? Do you have any stories, examples of, hey, I was working with this one customer, this was the hypothesis. You don't have to name names, obviously. And these are some of the things that we discovered. Could you give me some examples of what success might look like?
Yeah. Let's see. So in terms of what success might look like A, you've got, the actual output, which is typically, a document that has the whole process out there. And that's a great first step, but that's definitely not where the success factor comes in, right? It's really, will this be used? Will this sort of document be referred to when people are looking to make decisions or uncover different parts of the product to focus on? And so what success really looks like is having a sort of rollout and action plan. Sometimes we refer to it as kind of like it's still like evangelization of the research. So you've done it, and then you kind of shout it from the rooftops to the right groups, and you get people from other teams on these calls. You maybe walk them through how to even go about reading through one of these sorts of journeys. We talked a little bit before we started the podcast call just about service blueprints and how that's even just a lot more of a deeper analysis into that customer journey and what all goes on behind the scenes within companies. A lot of these documents can be super complex. You can read through them, downward column by column, row by row. It really depends on, what your goal is, what you're looking to uncover. So what I have found works the best, and, what really means success for these sorts of projects is having people involved. It's never good if something's just shelved, right? And I would say like the best way in ensuring or working towards that happening is involving people as early on as you can, right? Not just receiving some email invite I don't know, 3 months after, the project started, because now we've wrapped up. And yay, now come and learn about this new thing. That's great. Is that going to stick? People need to hear about things more than once. They need to get excited about it. They need to understand, like, what's in it for me? Like, how can this help my role as a salesperson? How can this help my role as a marketing person? How can this help my role as a software developer? Right? There's all so many different ways in which this information can help people within their roles, whether it's just understanding their customer better and having them top of mind when building out a product for them, or whether it's learning a little bit about their customer. And now on your next sales call, you might be able to lean into some sort of value or interest point that you've learned about the customer through going through these maps that you didn't know about before.
Okay, so I want to get your hot take on something, which is, what would you say is more important when it comes down to UX and customer experience and figuring out exactly what you want to put out? Is it that it feels easy, or is it that the percentage of the users get the experience or get what they need done? In other words, there's kind of two primary metrics that I oftentimes see when we're trying to measure and get the voice of the customer back in this experience. And one is like, NPS or customer sat, right? We're looking and saying, was it pleasant? Did the user enjoy it? Was it good? And then there's the other side, which is the user was able to do the thing that they needed to do. And which one of those, if you had to pick, like, and it put them in an arena, fight to the death, which of those is actually more important?
Mm-hmm. I want to get a little bit more clear on the first one. So, it sounds like you're using just like some much more classic metrics for customer satisfaction. And then the second one is more around like, are they able to execute on their task?
Yeah, like you one of the examples that I think that, or the reason I think I'm thinking about this, because you started with the example of accounting software. It's like, I have to use it for my job, right? And I know I can accomplish the task at hand. In fact, if I don't accomplish the task at hand, the company either goes out of business or I lose my job, because it's that critical as part of my role. I have to use the software. And so, like, when you're thinking about UX design and what you're trying to do, is it more focused on how do I ensure that accountant A is able to get in and do the job that they need to do each week? Or is it more important that they're able to do it, but who really cares if they're able to do it as much as like they really enjoy doing it, right? Should we be optimizing for ease of use and positive experience versus like, functionality and power and capability? Because I think there's always this like tug and pull between, ooh, this was a delightful experience versus, ooh, this was a really effective experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, delight versus effect. I mean, like you say, I have to choose one. Don't want to choose one. Yeah, ultimately,
I know, that's why it's a hot take, Lauren. That's the point.
you need it to be a good experience that they enjoy. The reason for it is if simply all it does is lets you get your task done, you do not have a competitive edge. That's, again, one area where I work with clients a lot. It's in competitive analyses, and I've seen it before with clients. This isn't all hypothetical. It's, well, actually, like, we're getting, everybody's able to do the job. They're able to get it done. There's no complaints really. And that's all good and great. But the moments that someone else comes out with a product where, it allows you to get things done, However, it also on top of it is a great experience. That one's going to win out. So I think when you look at just tasks and getting things done, you lose a lot of the competitive edge that you might have. And I find that in the world of technology, SaaS tools, especially for B2B, like they've been the most behind in terms of people's expectations of how good an experience it could be. Like what I mean by this is, we've all used Netflix for, quite a while now. And it really stood out because it was a great experience for people. I mean, it completely changed the game and how we consume content so that we haven't like bought and are owning forever now, right? Things like banking and accounting, it seems like those sorts of industries, again, because the task has to get done, your job depends on it. Like whether it's a good experience or not, you must get through this. And I need this done by this time, end of month, whatever it is. It kind of didn't really matter. These companies got to not feel the push and rush and pressure to have a really good experience. Then you had things like competitor banks coming out and these really innovative apps. And, 5-10 years ago where we did start seeing this more. So I think with SaaS, it was able to get away for a really long time of just being able to help someone get a task done, no matter if the experience is good or bad. That's not the case anymore. And I've noticed it's the companies who don't see that urgency in it, who aren't listening to the insights, who aren't listening to, the strategies and thoughts that the designers are pitching and product people are pitching. And you have the people higher up who are maybe just more focused on, again, the short term and a couple scores. They're the ones who do fall behind. It does take a certain amount of bravery. I mean, some smart bravery, right? Some strategic, to really step out there in order to survive and in order to not just have the next company who can, have a nicer experience, or maybe you can get that same task done with a different company and it's just so much cheaper. All it takes is that company to figure out how to operationalize stuff a little bit better, maybe have, a third of the amount of a team working on this product, and you're gone.
Convincing argument. I think I see where she's coming from. Lauren, is as people are getting more and more, because everybody has a customer experience team, everybody's trying to solve this internally. I'm seeing more and more the value of allowing a consultant to come in to assist you with this. It just makes sense because, again, we all have that bias. How frequently should I be bringing someone internally? Again, just best practices, is that's once a year? Is that once every 3 years? How do I make sure I have those checks and balances?
Yeah. It definitely depends on the size of the project and, what's, I guess what the business's goals, like, is it kind of business as usual, but we're looking just to optimize a little bit? Is it, hey, we're in crisis mode and we really need a fresh perspective? But ideally, I would say every 6 months. Ideally, they would have at least one person internally, although, again, companies just don't always have the means to do that, who can really get some research operations going and some regular touch bases with customers. And, like you mentioned, NPS and CSAT, again, for that to like continue on every few months so we can really look at progress over time. When it comes to bringing in someone from the external in, I would say every 6 months is good. So much can happen within a year. Whereas if you wait that long, there's often a lot of catch up then to do if you're bringing in the same consultant. So much can change. You can have staff turnover, process turnover. But yeah, it's good to just keep it as a regular thing going. Also because a lot of the insights, depending on your research question, what you're looking at, they do need to be refreshed as well. So this is what we found at the time. Have there been big changes in the market? Has there been a big new product or like a big new feature that the product has released? And now we need to see like, how are things now? That's really important too. And I think people pick up on that, right? Like if, if you developed a great research document for them, but that was 2 years ago, like, why would they still refer to it? There could still be some great stuff in there, but it's also very natural for them to go, this might be a little stale now. Like, I'll look through it, but how much am I going to really lean on this to help me inform my decisions going forward?
Yeah, we do have a little bit of a recency bias, I think, in tech. The more recently a document was created or updated, the more trustworthy it tends to be. So if it ends up getting too old, then we probably don't trust it, even if it's still really rock solid.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, I'm curious. I know your background. You have a lot that you bring the approach of systems thinking, and for a lot of people in SaaS, especially if they're scaling quickly and their team is growing fast and they're kind of running around a little bit chaotic, just trying to figure out how to keep growing and how to keep changing. They haven't necessarily put a lot of this like disciplined system thinking process in place. I guess maybe if you could help make the case a little bit for like, why should you step back and take on that system thinking hat and start trying to apply that to your business? And when does it make sense to do that potentially?
Yeah. I feel like the answer with when is almost always like as soon as you can. But realistically, I think the systems thinking approach, maybe you haven't started with that. But as soon as your product starts to scale, like at that point, it's quite critical, right? Because you do have so many different aspects that you're having to look at and having to consider in order to scale effectively. I've worked with clients who, as a lot of things happen, like they kind of started small and scrappy, building out some product, maybe even just to help them in one part of their operations. And since then have been able to actually make this into a product that now they white label and, sell to other companies. And they've really developed like a great B2B SaaS product. But they were so focused on just reacting to what was needed in the market and from clients. They weren't really taking a step back and looking at, again, is this just one very vocal client, for example? Do they represent most clients in the market that we would be looking to go after to serve? Already, those are examples of systems thinking that you can start using and maybe not even applying yet, but just getting those gears turning. And I think technology can help a lot with that, right? Like find the opposite of systems thinking. It is just that really focused problem that it's a lot more siloed in. And sometimes that focus is great and that's what we need. But looking at the bigger system, the earlier you can do that, the more useful it's going to be for you, the more expansive your thoughts can be, the more strategic you can be as well.
Lauren, I'm a big fan of Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, and I've always wanted to ask somebody in your situation if this applies in business to business, because obviously they're business to consumer. Mm-hmm. He made a statement that his mentor gave him some advice. He said, "Hey, don't worry about scale. Create an experience that a customer will love. Figure that out, and then figure out how to scale." Mm-hmm. Does that apply to B2B? Because again, we don't have all these investment firms anymore giving SaaS companies all this outrageous amount of money, and it's just like acquire as many customers as you possibly can, and then it'll all take care of itself. Now it's like we got to be profitable. Yeah. Does that work at B2B? Should you be focused more around the experience and not so much of how it scales? Get that right first, and then figure out how to scale. Kind of going back to what Todd said when he asked you, is it better to have an experience versus people just going in and using your product? You said, well, you want an experience first because, someone's going to try to come steal that business. What do you think on creating the experience? Do you go all in and figure out how do we create that 10 and then scale? Or do you go the other way and say, okay, what's the, I don't want to say it this way, what's the minimum amount of work we can do to have a great experience and stop there and work ourselves up? Does that make any sense? And what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say two things. One is it depends how you define success and scaling and how you do want to scale, right? People have different strategies. And if you are more focused and on acquisition, and that's the biggest thing, and retention doesn't matter so much, then yeah, that's not as big of an issue. But again, this is where I've seen companies fail at this, is that they've just looked at less. And I will say this, sorry, um I don't think that B2B has to have quite as much focus as B2C does on the experience. However, absolutely a lot still, and I would argue a lot more than the average SaaS company has. And I can give an example of this. I mean, even in my own work, within my business, I might buy subscriptions for different sorts of SaaS products. If money's not flowing for me at certain times, I am looking at the one that, oh, the experience is rough, but it's a third of the price of going with this other company who has a great platform. Um, but then it's like, okay, well, what does that do for your job later down the road? Are there more tech issues? And are you moving forward quick enough in terms of new features and things like that? So I still absolutely would base it on experience and make sure companies focus on that. I think especially in the business world, right? There's less emotion behind decisions. It's less maybe about like the love of a brand, like with Airbnb and you as a customer with that. So because people are a lot more objective in those sorts of decisions with what sorts of products to use, you absolutely have to be just a higher performer and a better experience. Contracts can be hard to get out of, but if that's the only reason why you have a sticky relationship with your customer because it's difficult for them to get out and maybe go through that new approval process of getting a new SaaS, like that is not where you want to have that assurance and scaling of keeping people around, because that can change. And if people really want out, they'll find an out. And all it takes is a smoother experience. And again, I've seen it. I've seen businesses who've depended on, maybe they don't have as many customers, right? B2B, we see that a lot. They only have a couple, but, they're really high paying customers. That customer leaves, and after many months of research and other team members saying, hey, like, people aren't happy over here. Like, this is something you really need to focus on. And here's what some competitors are doing. And here's what we're seeing in the market of where people are moving to. If those things are ignored, and then all of a sudden that one big customer that's kind of keeping everything afloat goes, like, all of a sudden half the team is gone. And yeah, the company's, dealing with a lot bigger problems now.
Yeah, no, it can be a risky place to be if all of your revenue is tied up in just a couple of individual customers, and you could, lose 20% of your revenue overnight with one churn. It begs the question. I'm curious, Lauren, then it sounds like there's, at least in B2B, right? There's not that same level of like loyalty and excitement that you might get in a B2C type world. Like, just let's accept it. Like, B2B software is a little bit stuffier, a little bit less exciting. You don't have that same emotional connection that you do in B2C SaaS. But there's obviously, there are companies that probably fit the profile to where this type of discipline is much more important. I mean, we already mentioned one. If you have a really high ARPA and a small number of customers, then this is a place where you got to be really disciplined, because every churn is going to hurt that much more.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious, as far as kind of ideal profile here, is this specific? Are there specific industries or software category segments or business models where you should be a little bit more disciplined in thinking about this type of approach earlier?
I mean, I would say probably less regulated industries. Like, I've worked in really regulated ones within, say, like finance and healthcare, or even sustainability, where you're looking at a ton of different requirements and regulations that companies in certain areas must go through in order to fulfill the different sorts of requirements for carbon emissions, for example. Those ones are so specialized and have such important regulatory aspects of them, that once you find a company that you do trust in those areas and you do those sorts of things right, I think those ones are the ones that are stickier, where it's going to take a lot more for a client to say, thanks so much, I'm out of here, I found someone better. So if there's different sorts of requirements within those companies that actually might overtake, like experience is nice, but what we really need to make sure is we're on top of regulations. So the experience isn't so great here, but we need to stick with them, because with these people, we know they're doing those sorts of things right. So I would say, in industries where that's less of a focus, those are the areas where it's even that much more important to focus on experience, because I think just the opportunity for churn there is that much higher. There's less skin in the game. And if you do a risk assessment, there's less risk if you're jumping to someone else, if they're not helping in these like really, really focused, regulated areas.
Lauren, this has been fantastic. And this show is called SaaS Therapy for a reason. We try to get real and vulnerable with people. Todd asks you hot take questions that he says you can't just say it depends. We want to really help our people have tactical answers that they can go apply. So we always leave our audience with one final question. Lauren, if you could give everyone a homework assignment, something to work on this week, what would be your homework for them?
Talk to 5 customers.
And do I ask a particular question, or just how the experience? Like, I love that. I love the challenge. Talk to five customers. What would be something that I would ask or say, or what? I'm just listening. What help me understand that a little bit more. I love that, actually. I love talking to customers. So
Absolutely.
Give me your feedback on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say, like, it was so blunt because, like, it needs to be action oriented. Enough of this kind of sitting in strategy. Sometimes it's like, no, just call them up, get a conversation going. And, I could get into the research side of like how important it is to ask certain questions in certain ways, and when to ask questions and what to prompt and not lead. And I think that's what stops people a lot from asking questions and getting in touch too, right? Am I asking the right thing? But if you want to keep it simple, how's it been going? And, start really open-ended. Have some ideas in mind of what you want to get to in the conversation. Try not to prompt them at the start. See what they have to say. And then if you are like they've only talked about positive, like, I want to make sure they get into some negative, like, ask them, like, and what have your challenges been? And like, don't worry about hurting my feelings. Like, always start those calls like that. Like, we really want to know how it's been for you. We're looking at improving. And the best way that we can help with that is by really hearing what's been going on. And then sometimes customers can get a little bit stuck as well, right? Like, you don't always think of, I did forget 2 weeks ago, I actually had this experience. And, maybe that's so in the past. So, also when you call them up, say, hey, let's start with the conversation. And halfway through our call, like, do you mind sharing your screen and just walking me through, like, the next task you have to do on this tool? Like, I'd love to see how it goes. So, and I almost like, again, there's so much methods that should go behind this sort of stuff. But yeah, that face-to-face and doing it continuously. So yeah, rip off that Band-Aids in the next 7 days, get some customers on the phone. Ask them if they can be recorded. And, that sort of stuff is gold, and spread it within the company. Get other people talking about customers too, and they'll naturally just think of them more.
Awesome. Lauren, thanks again so much for joining us today on the show, and for your willingness to share some insights with us about this space. Before we go, I guess, Lauren, people could find you on LinkedIn. Lauren Oswald is your handle there. I think maybe if you would want to plug your website so they know where to go find you, how should people know if they want to get in touch with you?
Sure. Yeah. So best way is LinkedIn and my website. And my website is called osystema.com. So again, just a nod to systems research there. And that link is also right on my LinkedIn profile as well. But yeah, Lauren Oswald, user experience research, market research at osystema.com.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lauren, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.